Welcome to the You Are the Spell podcast with Aunt Carla. Join me each episode as I teach witches and other spiritual practitioners how to develop magical confidence and sovereignty in their practice. Hello and happy winter. Well, almost winter. Next week, we will have the Winter Solstice, which means winter time and a very spiritual time for many different spiritual paths, or also just a lot of consumer shopping and eating. And no matter what side of that spiritual path you're on, I have something for you today. So we're going to be talking about, I'm going to be talking about Yule, Christmas, and Santa Claus. Let's go. So let's start with the pagan festival of Yule. This is where it kind of all starts. Yule, also known as Yule Tide, and Yule is spelled Y-U-L-E. It's a festival that was historically observed by the Germanic peoples. So it has its origins in ancient Norse and Germanic pagan celebrations that marked the winter solstice, which is the shortest day and the longest night of the year. The winter solstice usually happens around December 21st. And the ancient Norse, they believed that during this time, the sun was reborn and the days would gradually lengthen. And they enjoyed a 12-day feast that celebrated the return of the sun. So my husband and I were recently talking about this, and we live in New York, and it's often very cold. Like it gets really cold round about, January, February. And we're kind of like, how come the whole winter celebration doesn't happen? Why don't they celebrate all of these, these light-filled holidays then? Well, it's because it's really about the light. On the winter solstice, that is when you have the longest night of the year. It's so dark. So the ancient Norse and Germanic people and other cultures, I'm sure as well, they realized that that was like the darkest it was going to get. And after that point, that's when the sun begins to return a little by little by little by little. So that darkest night is actually the peak of winter, not when it's coldest. So I thought that was very interesting. So when it got to be the darkest time, the darkest, longest night, that's when they celebrated the sun coming. And think about that from a spiritual point of view, that it's always darkest before the dawn. So as soon as that dark, dark, dark night happened, that's when they began to have their feast. That's when they began to celebrate the return of the sun, because they knew that the sun was going to return. So one of those prominent traditions associated with Yule is the Yule log. So in Norse and Celtic cultures, the families would go out into the forest and they would bring a large home back into their homes to burn in the hearth. And this Yule log, it also symbolized the return of the sun and the promise of longer days. This Yule celebration also involved feasting, drinking, and other various festivities. It was a time for communities to come together, exchange gifts, and enjoy the company of friends and family. And we still do that now. Now, the Bible does not provide a specific date for the birth of Jesus Christ, but in the 4th century, Pope Julius I is often credited with officially establishing December 25th as the date for the celebration of the birth of Jesus. So according to Pope Julius I, Jesus was a Capricorn. Hey, I get it. Anyway, Capricorn myself. So although it's said that this choice may have been more of an attempt to Christianize existing pagan celebrations, thereby making Christianity more acceptable to the Roman population. I've talked about this in several other podcasts about how different pagan celebrations became rebranded into Christian ones. And I've been hearing a lot, on the internet, on social medias, about people complaining, saying that Christian holidays weren't influenced by pagan holidays, or that they didn't steal these different traditions. I'm not saying any of those things. But remember, and I always want people to remember this, Christianity is only 2,000 years old. Like Jesus Christ only walked around this earth 2,000 years ago. And humanity, civilization has been around for about 10,000 years. So before Jesus was here, there were people who had other belief systems and they had other ways of making sense of what was going on in the heavens and going on around them. So when Christianity came to power, the powers that be saw these other celebrations going on and they did co-opt some of them. I'm not saying anyone stole anything, but I think there's definitely a lot of influence that happened. And it goes back so far that we don't even know. So a lot of us are just making these kind of guesses. But if you ask me, the holidays that were here first, the celebrations, the different things that were happening first, they definitely had an influence on holidays that we celebrate to this day. And I will keep going and you will see what that means. So, with the spread of Christianity, many of these pagan traditions were incorporated into Christian celebrations to facilitate the conversion of pagan populations. And the timing of Yule, it coincided with the Christian celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. So that did lead to the assimilation of Yule into Christmas. So while Yule has been largely absorbed into Christmas, some modern pagan communities continue to celebrate Yule as a distinctive festival and or a distinct festival, often focusing on its original pagan roots. And this may include rituals, feasting, and the lighting of Yule logs. So I know that a lot of people are still doing this. I have many pagan friends, Wiccan friends who are decorating Yule altars, who are creating their own or going foraging for Yule logs. So there are all of these traditions that have been going on so long. And I believe everyone has a right to honor whatever that is that makes them happy. And by the way, before I forget, let's see. I have a winter witch party coming up. I'm doing this December 18th through the 21st, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, about 1 o'clock every day of those days. I will be teaching winter witch workshops. So I'll be talking about how to use magic and astrology to plan for the most magical 2024. And I call it Winter Witch because it covers everything. So whether you celebrate Yule or Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever it is that you celebrate, if you're a witch and it's winter and it's I suppose that means northern hemisphere, there's going to be something for you. So I hope that you tune in. All right, let's talk about another celebration, and that one would be Saturnalia. And Saturnalia was an ancient Roman festival, and it was dedicated to the agricultural god Saturn. And I thought this was so interesting because I did not know that Saturn was considered an agricultural god until I did this research. And this celebration typically took place around the winter solstice, and it lasted for several days in December. And it was one of the most popular and widely observed festivals in the Roman calendar. Now, the exact dates of Saturnalia varied, but they often fell between December 17th and December 23rd. So, here are the key aspects of the history and traditions associated with Saturnalia. So, Saturn, honoring Saturn. So, Saturnalia was primarily dedicated to Saturn, who is the god of agriculture and harvest in Roman mythology. Saturn was often associated with the Golden Age, a mythical period of peace and prosperity. That was so new to me. I had this different idea that, like in astrology, Saturn is karma and delays and responsibility. But I just learned earlier this week that Saturn was associated with the golden age of this mythical period of peace and prosperity. How interesting. So, this festival began with a sacrifice at the Temple of Saturn in the Roman Forum, and the celebration lasted for about a week, and during which social conventions were temporarily suspended. And one of the distinctive features of Saturnalia was the inversion of social roles. For example, slaves were temporarily considered equals to their masters, and social norms were relaxed. And it was a time for joy, freedom, and feasting. So that's happened there. I know that there were different holidays or celebrations even more recently, like in the 1800s. So, my husband, he works in history, and during the 1800s, in New York, they had this thing called, I guess, during like this 12 days event, and during which they would have Jim would dress up in a woman. He would wear a woman's dress, and he would say, "I am the Lord of Misrule." And it was this whole thing where everything's basically turned on its head. Whereas like men would dress as women, women would dress as men, slaves were treated like their masters, like nothing normal happened or regular. So it was a time for social reversals and a lot of fun, it sounds like. There was also gift giving. Exchanging gifts was a common practice during Saturnalia. People would give each other small presents called sigilleria, which were often figurines made of wax or clay. And then it was also, Saturnalia was also a time of feasting and merriment. They had banquets and parties, and people indulged in rich foods and drinks. The festivities, they had singing and dancing and playing games. That sounds really familiar, doesn't it? And then there were also public celebrations because public spaces were adorned with decorations and the streets were filled with processions, music, and revelry. Temples were often closed during Saturnalia, and normal business and legal activities were suspended. Also, there were gambling and dice games that were a significant part of Saturnalia. So this th- so there was a temporary suspension of order and a lot of element of chance. So there were these dice games, roll of the dice. All of these things could happen during Saturnalia. How interesting, right? So you're hearing me talk about all these different things, and you can say that you could probably see the influence that we feel now in Christmas traditions, right? The gift giving, the feasting, the suspension of social norms is very similar to some of the modern Christian celebrations that we see now. So we just want to let you know that, Christmas, this was not new. This was nothing new. So Saturnalia did play a role in shaping certain cultural practices. And as I mentioned, it totally predates the emergence of Christianity. And over time, as Christianity became the dominant religion in the Roman Empire, some of those Saturnalia aspects were absorbed into Christmas, with December 25th eventually becoming associated with the birth of Jesus Christ. All right, so now let's get into the history of Christmas. So, Christmas, the history of Christmas, it's this rich tapestry when you think about it. It's woven from all of these different cultural, religious, historical threads. And now, while the celebration of Christmas is now associated with Christian, as we mentioned, those origins are rooted in a combination of pagan, Roman, and early Christian practices, such as pagan roots. So, we mentioned that many of these Christian traditions, they have roots in pagan winter festivals. The Roman festival of Saturnalia, which we mentioned, it honored the agricultural god of Saturn, celebrated in late December, and there was feasting, gift giving, temporary reversal of social roles. Okay, boom. Winter solstice celebrations. Aha! In many ancient cultures, the winter solstice, which occurs around December 21st or 22nd in the northern hemisphere, it marked the shortest day and the longest night of the year, and people celebrated the return of longer days and the promise of spring. And then there was the Christian adoption, meaning the celebration of Christmas as the birth of Jesus Christ. Now, this was not established in the early Christian church. In fact, the Bible does not specify the date of Jesus' birth, and it wasn't until the 4th century that December 25th was officially chosen as the date for Christmas. And as I said, it's possibly the idea was to coincide with the existing pagan festivities. Because as I like to tell you, pagan parties were fun. Pagans were not giving up their parties for not for nothing. So I believe the Christian powers that be were like, okay, well, if you can't beat them, join them. So how about we just have some parties that are also around the same time, and we're going to give it their own origin story and its own little backstory, and we'll just see what happens. And now we see what happens. All right. Now, in the Middle Ages, Christmas became a time of great celebration in Europe. And the 12 days of Christmas, starting on December 25th and ending on the Epiphany, which is January 6th, it was marked by feasts, gift giving, and various festivities. So there we go again with that 12 days of Christmas. Do you remember? On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a partridge in a pear tree. So, like, again, my husband works in history. He he does a lot of musical stuff, and this time of the year he accompanies a storyteller, Jonathan Cruck, for for actually the story, A Christmas Carol. And but at the very beginning, Jim has like this little opening act where he leads the audience through the 12 days of Christmas. So he just grabs his guitar and he usually starts with something like, most people think they know the 12 days of Christmas, but usually around 4, it kind of breaks down. Let's see how well you do. And then he begins to sing, and then the audience sings along. And to me, it's like my favorite part of the whole show because it's singing, it's musical, and people love to try to remember, if they can remember, what was day 8 maids of milking, or was it the lords of leaping, or the was it squirrels are running? Like, what is that? And it's so much fun. If you do not know this song, I highly recommend that you go out right now. Go to YouTube. Actually, no, no, no. Listen to this podcast first. After the podcast, after you finish listening to it, go listen to the 12 Days of Christmas, and get a little laugh. Okay, so now, believe it or not, after the Middle Ages, there was actually Puritan opposition to Christmas. So I'm talking about, this is like Christmas through the years. So in the 17th century, Puritans in England and later in the American colonies, they opposed the celebration of Christmas. They viewed it as a pagan influenced holiday, and they discouraged its observance. And actually, some people still do to this day, believe it or not, because, and you know why? Because they say that it is not in the Bible. So there it goes again. There are people that say, well, Christmas is not in the Bible, therefore, like the celebration of it. We know about the not we know that the story of the birth of baby Jesus is in there, but the celebration of his birth, this birthday party, that is not in the Bible, therefore many people do not celebrate it. And around the time of the 17th century, the Puritans in England and other places, they were like, no, we're not doing Christmas. We're not doing it. So I thought that was very interesting. Now, in the 19th century, during Victorian era, there was actually a revival of the Christmas traditions, particularly in England and the United States. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, they popularized the Christmas tree and Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, and that contributed to the sentimental and festive aspects of the holiday. Remember, I was telling you how my husband Jim, he's a musical accompanist for a version of A Christmas Carol by it's told by a storyteller, and it's about this guy who is he's rich, but he's really cheap, and he's mean, and he has a night where he is visited by 3 different ghosts, and they show him what life could be like for him if he doesn't change his ways, if he doesn't learn to become charitable. And if you want to know more about that, go find the story and go read it. It's very interesting. So, A Christmas Carol, that story, it helped to bring Christmas and its traditions back into fashion. Now, globally, different cultures and countries have unique Christmas traditions. So, for example, in some regions, there's St. Nicholas and other gift bringing figures that play a significant role. And in others, Christmas is just celebrated with specific foods and rituals and customs. So, the overall history of Christmas, it's complex and multifaceted, and it's shaped by so many different influences. And it's one of the most widely celebrated holidays around the world, which even transcends its original religious context to encompass a wide range of cultural and secular festivities. So that's like the history of Christmas, and not just the history, but just the whole overarching trajectory or storyline of Christmas. Yeah. So now let's talk about Santa, the legend of Santa Claus. Now, the history of Santa Claus is a rich and varied one, and it has evolved over the centuries, and it has drawn from different cultural and historical influences. And the modern image of Santa that we think about also has come from other traditions and legend. So I'm going to give you like a little overview of the history of Santa Claus. So first, there was Saint Nicholas from the third and fourth centuries. Yes, the origins of Santa Claus can be traced back to a Christian bishop named Saint Nicholas, who lived in the third and fourth centuries in Myra, which was a town in modern day Turkey. St. Nicholas was known for his generosity and kindness, especially towards children, and the anniversary of his death, December 6th, became a day for gift giving in many European countries. See, that's third or fourth centuries. Next up, we have the Dutch Sinterklaas. Dutch settlers, they brought the tradition of St. Nicholas, also known as Sinterklaas in Dutch, to America in the 18th century. And in the Dutch tradition, Sinterklaas was accompanied by helpers known as Zwart Piet or Black Peter. If you know anything about Black Peter, it's Black Peter would come and take the bad kids away. So Black Peter was used, and he wasn't like black as an African. He was just like black, black as in the color black. But of course, very scary looking, of course. And his he the idea or the concept of Black Peter was used to threaten kids. So like, you be good or Black Peter's going to come and get you. Next, I'm not even going to touch that. Then we have the evolution in America. In the 19th century, the image of Santa Claus, it underwent significant changes in America here. So there was various cultural elements, including the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, which was commonly known as The Night Before Christmas, and all through the house. Okay, The Night Before Christmas, that's what it's called. But the rest of it goes, or at least some of it, the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. And there's like this beautiful story that is told in this poem. So this poem was published in 1823, and it contributed to shaping the modern Santa Claus image. It describes Santa as this plump, jolly figure who traveled in a sleigh pulled by reindeer, and he entered homes through chimneys to deliver the gifts. By the way, let me step back a little bit for the St. Nicholas story. Now, the thing about St. Nicholas, the chimney idea comes from another story, another mythology legend of Saint Nicholas, was that he had heard about a man who had three daughters, and they were very poor, or they had become poor. I don't know exactly their origin story, but the idea was that their father was afraid that because they had no money, that they were not going to have a dowry and that they would not be able to marry. So the idea is that St. Nicholas heard this story, and he didn't want to embarrass the father. Like, he knew he just couldn't say like, "Hey, let me help you out." He knew that the father would be too proud. So what St. Nicholas did, allegedly, supposedly, reportedly, he took 3 balls of gold and he threw them down the chimney, and they landed in the stockings, in the young women's, the young ladies' stockings. So they each received a ball of gold, and with that money as their dowry, they could now afford to be married. So that is also where the the mythology behind Christmas stockings. So also those 3 gold balls, they also represent, when people have oranges during during the Christmas season. Oranges also kind of reminiscent of those gold balls that Santa Claus, or that Saint Nick sent down the chimney. So that's what the whole thing about, what is the chimney about? So Saint Nicholas, that myth or that story was that he threw the gold balls down the chimney. But here, this poem has Santa Claus entering the home through the chimney to deliver gifts. So you see how that story has evolved. Later on, much more modern, we have Coca-Cola Santa Claus. Now there's that modern visual depiction of Santa Claus as this jolly, rotund man in a red suit with white fur trim. It became really popular due to Coca-Cola's marketing. Think about that. So in the 1930s, the beverage company Coca-Cola, they commissioned an artist by the name of Haddon Sundblom, say that 5 times fast, to create a series of images featuring Santa Claus for its holiday advertising campaigns. And these images, they solidified the modern portrayal of Santa that is now universally recognized. Coca-Cola did that. And over time, that image of Santa Claus became a globally recognized symbol of Christmas, with various countries adapting the character to their own cultural traditions. And different cultures have their unique variations of Santa Claus, which also incorporates their local customs and folklore. So today, Santa Claus is a central figure in the celebration of Christmas. He symbolizes generosity, joy, and the spirit of giving. And while his image and characteristics may vary slightly across cultures, that essence of Santa Claus as a beloved figure associated with gift giving and spreading joy, it remains universal. All right, so I want to bring back some magical stuff. I mean, this is a magical podcast. So I want to talk now about Santa as an egregore. What's an egregore, right? An egregore is a concept that has roots in mysticism, occultism, and esotericism, and it refers to a thought form or a collective consciousness that's created and sustained by the collective beliefs, emotions, and intentions of a group of people. So basically, an egregore is a kind of psychic entity or energy that gains strength and form through the shared thoughts and feelings of a community. Now, the first time I ever heard about Santa as an egregore was from Meg Rosenbrier, the head witch over at Witch With Me. And I hadn't really thought about that till she said it, but it's basically this idea that Santa, the Santa Claus character that has come together in that Coca-Cola advertisement that we see in our minds when we think of Santa, it has taken a life of its own. The idea of this Santa Claus person, this Santa Claus character, it has taken a life of its own because of us, because of the different thoughts that we have projected onto this person or this character. We say Santa Claus is blah blah blah, and there's a whole other story that has people have written other stories about it. And even my husband and I, we have a musical called Santa's Reindeer Ranch. You know what? I think I will also link down below, link to that. You can see it. It's like half an hour, and basically, everyone has kind of heard about Santa Claus, right? So we have Santa's Reindeer Ranch, and it's the story. Well, I won't get into all the story, but Santa's reindeer ranch is the place that reindeers go to get trained to fly with Santa on his sled. Like they got to get trained, right? So we created a musical that talked about it. So here it is. The story started wherever it started, the Santa Claus story, and people are continually adding to it. No one owns the story of Santa. It started, there was this St. Nicholas, Santa Claus person, and then it just becomes this thing all of its own, and that's because of us. That is the energy that we as humans put into it, the thoughts, the beliefs, the expectations, the happy feelings, or whatever feelings you have attached to it. That is us. We as a people have created this egregore because it is a thought form. It is the collective beliefs. So for example, Santa Claus is a widely recognized and culturally significant figure associated with Christmas. And this belief, this collective belief in Santa among children especially, it is strong and it's shared across various societies. They believe in and they invest this emotional energy into the character of Santa Claus. And the more that they do that, the more powerful this egregore becomes. Next, there are creation through rituals. There's the annual celebration of Christmas, right? But there's traditions such as writing letters to Santa, leaving out milk and cookies, the anticipation of Santa's arrival on Christmas Eve. These can be seen as rituals that contribute to the creation and reinforcement of that Santa Claus egregore. And these activities, they involve a collective focus and energy directed toward the manifestation of Santa Claus. Like even I don't know if is that the I'm not sure if it's like the weather people who it like there's like a website that they chart Santa Claus's flight through through Christmas Eve, like where they think he is at any given time on Christmas Eve. Like what is that? Someone came up with that and they do it every year. Also, there are attributes and characteristics for Santa, such as, and they're widely agreed upon, right? Such as his jolly appearance, red suit, white beard, and the association with gift giving. So these shared characteristics, they also create this consistency and strength of Santa Claus as an egregore, and cannot forget the role in cultural identities, such as there's this shared experience that we all have during Christmas season. There's stories and songs and imagery that are associated with Santa Claus, and they all contribute to a collective narrative that strengthens this egregore's presence in the cultural psyche. Psyche. There you go. Now, just to be sure, to be fair, not everyone views Santa Claus as an egregore. Many people simply see Santa Claus as a beloved cultural figure and a symbol of the holiday season. And that's fine too. So now let's get into some magical correspondences for Yule and different ways to celebrate. Now, in various pagan and Wiccan traditions, Yule is celebrated as one of the festival markings of the winter solstice. And as we said, it typically occurs around December 21st in the northern hemisphere. Yule is a time to celebrate the return of the sun and the lengthening of days. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to have some magical correspondences associated with Yule and the winter solstice. So, if you would like to celebrate these or perhaps add some of these items or colors to your altar, you go right ahead. So, the colors red, green, gold, white. So, gold, well, let's go with red. Red represents the life force and the sun god. Green, it symbolizes the evergreen trees, which are often used as decorations during this time. Gold represents the returning sun, light, and prosperity. And white signifies purity and the winter snow. Now, different herbs that are associated with Yule are holly. We think of holly, mistletoe, pine, cedar, because also these are plants and herbs that are in season during the winter. One of the things that I really enjoy about getting into gardening and into nature, I've been paying a lot of attention to what is in season right now. What are the season cycles? What am I seeing? And so these ancient uh, pagans or just people who are nature based, every time there is a turn of the wheel of the witch's year, every 2 months or so, they're looking around at nature and they are observing, witnessing, and being grateful for what is in season right now. So right now it is winter, so well, just about winter. So we've already had a lot of leaves fall out of the ground, right? So we have a lot of trees that are bare, but there are still trees that are green. So if you're looking around, if you're an ancestor, if you know our ancestors were looking around and they're like, oh well, we have these trees that are bare, but we also have these evergreen trees that means something. So of course they gave meaning to them. So we have holly. Holly represents protection and it brings good luck. Mistletoe, it symbolizes fertility, love, and protection. And in some traditions, mistletoe is associated with kissing. Like, I was reading somewhere that mistletoe was originally hung up for good luck within someone's in a home. So someone got the idea of, well, if it's good luck, how about we kiss underneath it and we'll get even more luck, or maybe we'll get lucky. I don't know how that all started, but that whole kissing under the mistletoe, that is something that we see wintertime, Christmas time, Yule time. There's pine. Pine represents prosperity, purification, and growth. And cedar also symbolizes strength and protection. So pine and cedar are evergreen trees. They aren't the only evergreen trees. There are definitely more, but these are ones that we often see. There's also fir, and there's fir, there's spruce, and this is when we go to when you see your Christmas trees. Christmas trees are made of evergreens because they're green. It's wintertime, and you can still get them. They're still in season because they are evergreen. They are green all year round. Okay, if you want to use your crystals and stones that are associated with Yule include ruby, which represents the sun and its life giving properties. There's bloodstone, which is associated with strength, courage, and protection. Then there's also garnet, which symbolizes light, protection, and healing. Now, there are also symbols that are associated with Yule, and that's the sun wheel. It's a symbol of the sun's journey and the wheel of the year. There is the Yule log, which represents the warmth and light of the returning sun, and candles. Candles symbolize the returning light, and they're often used in rituals and decorations. So while we use candles any other time of the year, they're especially important at Yule time because they represent the light that is returning or that will be returning. When it comes to foods, there are nuts and fruits. Nuts and fruits, they represent the earth's abundance. Spices, such as cinnamon and nutmeg, they add warmth and flavor to Yule dishes. And then wassail, that's also a spiced cider or an ale that's often used in Yule celebrations. Now, other deities that were involved or associated with this time, the sun gods and goddesses. So deities that were associated with the sun, such as Ra, Helios, and Sol Invictus. Also, the mother goddess, of course, because the mother goddess symbolizes the earth's fertility and the promise of new life. So some of those older, classic, shall we say, or traditional rituals and activities for Yule include the Yule log ritual, which is burning a Yule log with specific intentions for the coming year. By the way, I was looking these up, and you can get some at like Lowe's or Home Depot. They sell Yule logs. It's like one log, and it is formulated to burn for an hour. I think they're about like $10, $11, something like that, which is a lot of money for just a piece of wood. But it is you could give it as a gift if you wanted to go to someone's house, or you could bring it to them, um and then it's not so, I don't know, you could I think it might make a cool gift anyway. They have a place for you to put your candle, and you could set intentions and you could burn it in your fire pit or your fireplace, and you would set intentions with that Yule log. Divination, there's always a good time for divination, right? And this is a great time for reflecting on the past year and seeking guidance for the future. And by the way, if you're doing my winter witch party, one of the things that we'll be doing on the first 2 days is taking stock, inventory of the current year, the old year, and making plans for the new one. And also we'll be doing divination with a tarot card reading, and also making plans and setting intentions. And we're also going to have a winter solstice ritual. So, winter witch party is happening next week. Oh, by the way, I never told you how to sign up for it. Go to sorry, redsoulflower.com/winter. I'll also have the link down below this video. All right, so then there's also feasting, sharing a festive meal with loved ones. That's another thing that people love to do, both for Yule and Christmas. And then intentions is also an important part of Yule, because you're setting intentions for personal growth and renewal. Then they're also expressing gratitude for the returning light and the blessings of the past year, and peace, focusing on peace and goodwill towards all. So Yule wasn't considered so much, it wasn't like we think of, as I mentioned before, the end of the year the new year used to be celebrated in April, in spring. But because that's when spring was, like, which makes a lot of sense. But they shifted it now. They shifted the end of the year to this Yuletide practice, because the whole idea was that it was the end of the dark nights and the beginning of the light returning. Whereas what made more sense to our ancestors was to do it when spring, like when the light was here, like when the light was really here. But okay, so whatever. But we will be starting a new year come January. So it's still kind of, you see how they kind of shoehorned it, and okay, it makes sense. Although I will say, if you're trying to start a new diet in January where it's still cold outside and you're still like, celebrating from Christmas and New Year's, it's kind of hard to do, right? But they didn't ask me. That's okay. Just know that Yule is still a wonderful time to set new intentions. And it doesn't have to be setting intentions for losing weight. It could be for, starting new good habits, making better choices. It could be any of those things. Maybe you want to, I don't know, have I don't know, have your bad girl era. I don't know. I'm not judging. But anyway, this is the time for setting intentions. And whatever you choose, it is all up to you. So before the end of the year, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who has been tuning in this year. You are the spell, this podcast of mine. This is my first year, and this episode right here is episode 25. And for something that I've been doing totally by myself, with the exception of a couple of interviews here and there, I can't believe I've even gotten to 25 in 1 year all by myself. That's almost like one every other week, which is amazing. And if you are a Spotify person, you may have seen your Wrapped. You know how Spotify comes each year and they tell you, like, they give you a end of year wrap up to let um, you know, how you did, or like what's going on with you. And it's cool. You get it, as a music listener, but as a podcaster, you get it as well. So I want to just give people a shout out. So, for example, according to Spotify, it says you're a top 10 podcast for 35 fans. That means for 35 of you, You Are the Spell is a top 10 podcast for you. That just blows my mind. And I'm so, so grateful for you. And then also for 23 of you, I'm a top 5 podcast. So it says You Are the Spell is a top podcast for 23 fans. 23. To me, that is amazing. And then it says, drum roll, please. Dun, dun, dun. And then it says that You're the Spell is the number one podcast for 11 fans. 11. So to know that there are 11 people out there listening, that this podcast is number one for you, it just, wow, it blows my mind. And I just want you to know that I do not take you for granted. And I'm so grateful for you to tune in. And I hope that I continue to give you what you are looking for. And I just want to say thank you. So have a great end of year, and I will see you again in the new year. I think I will probably have another episode before the end of the year, but in case I don't, I'll see you next year. And last but not least, we cannot forget the ancestors. And there is ancestral veneration that also happens during the winter solstice. And I want to talk about the different cultures that incorporated that in case you want to think about some rituals that you might want to try. So the Norse tradition, the Norse mythology, and other ancient Germanic traditions, they celebrated it. They celebrated the solstice also as a time to honor the spirits of their ancestors, as well as the god Odin. And the Yule season was also associated with the wild hunt, which was a ghostly procession of ancestral spirits. So this is like when they're like showing up. How cool is that? Now, the Celtic tradition, the Celts, particularly in Ireland and Scotland, they celebrated the winter solstice with a festival known as Alban Arthan. And this celebration marked the death and rebirth of the sun god. So during this time, there was a recognition of the cycles of life and death, and ancestors were often remembered and honored. Now, Asian traditions and some Asian cultures, such as those influenced by Confucianism or Taoism, they have festivals around the winter solstice that involve paying respects to their ancestors. One example is the Dongji festival in Chinese culture, where families come together to celebrate the winter solstice and honor their ancestors. And of course, modern paganism, what we're up to now, contemporary pagan and Wiccan traditions often incorporate elements of Yule celebrations, including the veneration of ancestors. And many modern practitioners create ancestor altars, hold rituals, and incorporate symbolic elements to connect with their familial and spiritual lineage during the Yule season. So I hope that today's episode has given you some food for thought and perhaps maybe given you some ideas on things that you might like to try. And I want to remind you that you can still get into my winter witch party that goes from, oh, and it's free. I should mention it's free from Monday, December 18th through Thursday, winter solstice on December 21st. I will be doing a lunch and learn winter witch workshop every day at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. There will be replays available each day. We will be working on learning how to use magic and astrology to plan for a magical 2024. So I hope that you can come. And if you want to sign up, just go to redsoulflower.com/winter. You'll get a workbook, a winter witch workbook right away. And there's some cool things to do, including a winter witch bingo card. And I have a bingo challenge happening throughout the month of December. And the 5 winners will receive a free year in my Magical You Creative Coven group. So hopefully, if you're hearing this, you could totally still sign up and, and try it. And actually, you don't even have to try it for the bingo prize if you don't want to. Some people have said that they've enjoyed doing the events, like doing the fun activities as date night. Someone else said they wanted to do it because they were fun things to do with their kids. So just something to think about. Winter witch bingo. I mean, it really doesn't get that much better than that. So I hope that you are having a fun, safe, joyous winter season because you are magic. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode, and be sure to tell all your witchy friends. If you have a question or comment, drop me a line at theredsoulflower@gmail.com. That's SOULFLOWER. And I'd love to hear from you. You can also join the Red Soulflower Magic family on Facebook to continue the conversation.